Yes, I'm Michael J. Davis. I go by Mike. I was a armed helicopter pilot. I joined the first armed helicopter outfit that existed anywhere in the world, originally named the UTT. I joined it in September of 1964 through September 1965. Between tours, I was a research and development test pilot on the Huey Cobra, the first aircraft that was designed exclusively as a gunship, as an attack helicopter, at the Bell plant where it was designed and made. And my team, the Huey Cobra Net team, took the first 6 Cobras from the production line at the Bell plant and took them into Vietnam in, I think, the last couple of days of August 1967. I was scheduled again for a 1-year tour there, but at the tail end of Tet 68, in a friendly fire accident, I was shot through the ankle and medevaced and medically retired. After I got out, I went back to Vietnam as a civilian, because between my first military tours, I had talked with my brother and my father and told them about what was happening in Vietnam, and they went as civilians, assisting the American effort, and of course the Americans assisting the South Vietnamese. And when I got out of the hospital and was medically retired from the Army, I went back home, which for me was Saigon, and I wound up then from 1969 through 1975, not being there all of the time, but being there parts of all the years in between there.
And what were you doing from 69 to 75? It was civilian?
Yes, it was civilian. My brother had formed a company to supply the officers' clubs, the NCO clubs, the enlisted men's clubs, and we were just providing them with supplies and equipment. And we started a factory up on Okinawa where we were manufacturing refrigeration and air conditioning type equipment and shipping it down to Vietnam.
Okay, so your knowledge of Vietnam is absolutely immense, both military and civilian-wise, as in working there. Let's concentrate on your flying, which I'm fascinated with. What sort of missions did you run before, obviously, 68, leading up
Yes.
to this tragic accident, tragic war wound?
Well, it was an accident. When civilians ask me, "Oh, what happened to your foot?" I say, "Oh, it's an old motorcycle accident," because I was riding my Honda through downtown Benoit, and an Arvin guard was sitting beside the road asleep, all wore out from Tet, and the noise woke him up as I went by, and it startled him, and he came up shooting. So I just say, old motorcycle accident, let it go at that. But to the issue of what kinds of missions did we fly, we were initially the only armed helicopter company available in the entire country. Now, different aviation companies would have 3 or in some cases, I think maybe even 4 platoons of what we called slick helicopters, because they didn't have guns sticking out on the sides. And they would carry troops and insert them into the landing zones, and they would haul cargo and things like that. And then they would each company would have 1 platoon of armed helicopters that they would use to support their own operations. In larger operations, though, they would need more armed helicopters than just theirs. And we had 3 platoons of all armed helicopters, so we could send a platoon out or a fire team out to assist in other helicopter companies' operations. We were quite often tasked to go out and do visual reconnaissance or reconnaissance by fire in various areas. If the area potentially had friendlies and enemy forces, We normally would restrict our reconnaissance to visual unless we were shot at, and then we'd shoot back. In areas where they were designated for us free fire zones, and that's an area like right along the border in War Zone D, in War Zone C. These are places that are segmented out and drawn on your map, and the people on the ground all have been told, you know, if you're good people, don't be here, because this is an area that is a battle area, and anytime we were in one of those designated areas and we saw movement, we shot it. It didn't make any difference what it was, because and I have to admit that sometimes there were occurrences where there would be friendly people there by accident, but they'd be killed, because everyone in the area has been told, do not go here, and it was either in the deep jungle or in there was an area between Saigon and Vung Tau called the Rung Set, and that was a very intense complex of channels. It is a delta kind of an area, and that was one of those free fire zones. And because the enemy used that as a supply transit area, so they told all the people, all the friendlies, just don't go there. And there was an incident where some people, I think, got hurt, killed there. On the reconnaissance missions, it was a situation where we would fly around and look, and usually, particularly in the jungled areas of like War Zone D, and that's the area I think that it would be best for me to focus on, because that's where we interfaced with the outlet end of the trail. It was heavily jungled in the areas that we worked, triple canopy. It was very difficult to engage the enemy in those areas. Occasionally there were clearings where you could actually see something, but most often when we located the enemy, it was because he shot at us, and we could hear the bullets as if they went close to our helicopters. And on those missions, then when you hear bullets coming by you, the crew chief or door gunner throw out a smoke grenade. If it's the fire team leader that gets shot at, which normally it is, to shoot at the first helicopter, then the wingman will shoot a pair of rockets to get them to keep their head down while he breaks out of the way. We would fly around. The fire team leader looks over the area, decides which direction to attack from, how much ordnance to expend, which direction to break, and he would call a fire mission. Now my fire team leader was D. Young. His call sign was Playboy 17. As his wingman, I was Playboy 18. So a fire mission from him would sound something like Playboy 18, this is 17, fire mission over. I'd say 18, just to confirm that I'm on the frequency with him. And he'd say, from my smoke, 250 degrees, 75 meters, expend 2 pairs, break right. And then I follow him around. We go in and we do what he issued. We break off, and then we'll come back and look into the area a little more, expose ourselves a little more, and if we don't get shot at anymore, we presume that we may have neutralized our target, and we go on looking. If we do get fired at more, and we realize that we're in something that, I mean, now and then we've come into a unit of enemy, not just a lone patrol, 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 guys out there, and things begin to heat up, and we fire, and once we've see that we're just about to empty all of our ordnance, our platoon leader is listening in on our frequency, and he will then begin to redeploy some other forces, so another fire team from somewhere else who isn't finding any action, and we begin to close in on it. And if things continue to be hot, it hasn't been unknown for that to develop into a full-scale operation, because there are times when just a lowly little two-ship light fire team could run into a battalion-sized enemy organization, and we wind up with a real battle on everyone's hands. Although that was rare. Most of the larger operations that we supported would be pre-planned insertions of troops into pre-designated landing zones. The armed helicopters would come in and do the final pre-strike and reconnaissance on the landing zone after artillery and sometimes fighter bombers. It'd be F-100s or A-1 Sky Raiders with 500,000-pound bombs that work the areas around the edges. Then we would come in as the final pre-strike team, and with machine guns and rockets, we would work into the areas that the fighter bombers hadn't hit with their bombs or with their 20-millimeter machine guns, whatever it was that they were using. So we would go in and suppress those, what we would hope, the last pockets of resistance. And then our commander, Sabre 6, would do a low reconnaissance through the area, and he would actually fly through the landing zone, and if he received fire, they would mark that area with smoke. If he did not, they'd actually look it over and decide, is he or is he not going to recommend that the slicks land the troops in there. And my company commander, Sabre 6, was a Major Jaggers, and he later became a general. And when Sabre 6 did a low recon through a landing zone, and you heard his slow, soft southern drawl come on the radio and say, Thunderbird 6, or whoever the call sign of the lead element of the troop carrying helicopters. You say, for instance, Thunderbird 6 is Sabre 6, and you get back a confirmation, Thunderbird 6. Say, well, we looked it over there. It looks there's no hostile fire received. Recommend you land south to north along my path. Touchdown in advance of my smoke. And every load ship, every troop ship helicopter has heard his voice. They know he has been in there where he's recommending they go. And it gives them a little extra confidence knowing that they're not going to be the first guy to go down in there. We all know there's no guarantees that they're not going to get shot at, but the chances are reduced knowing that it's been looked over by a professional. And then as the troop ships are going in, we'll have at a minimum 2 fire teams, 1 light fire team and 1 heavy fire team. The heavy fire team being supported by their platoon leader, 3 ships. And the light fire team will be on the side that is the least likely to have hostile fire. Then the heavy fire team on the most potentially dangerous side. And those aircraft will be flying in call it a daisy chain, making circles around off to the side so that someone's guns and rockets are pointed at that area of potential hostility at all times while they're landing and taking off and getting clear, and then we go on about our business once they're clear. And our business then to go about would be providing aerial fire support for the troops that are now on the ground, that are moving out into the tree lines and out into the forest. And if they've received contact, they identify their location and we go in and provide them aerial fire support.
Is there a Pacific mission that you remember that was dangerous?
Well, it's kind of hard to pin down one out of all of those that are doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Or out of so many more where you go out all day and you look for them and you listen for them and you don't find anything. Your adrenaline is pumped up.
Yeah.
You're ready, but it winds up being that you don't burn any of that adrenaline off because nothing happened all day. You go home exhausted. If you go out early in the morning and you start running into some real action and you're working at it all day, you get done at the end of the day and you think you'd be exhausted, but at the end of that day, you're ready to go back and take a shower and put on fresh clothes and go downtown and get something to eat and play the guitar and sing some songs and have a party. But to identify something that a specific mission, let me mention that another completely different area of operations that we did for a period of time, not my entire tours, but we would do pro-strike reconnaissance for B-52 strikes and sometimes lighter aircraft, A-1E, F-100 strikes, out in War Zone D, which was adjacent to the international border, and an area that was, I guess, it was a wide section of the trail. There's how they went about deciding where they were going to bomb, people well above my pay grade decided that. But we'd get the missions down. We'd be briefed on where the strikes were going to be, where we were to loiter on station waiting for the strike to complete. And the B-52s would come over and they'd be so high that we never saw them, we never heard them. It's just, just all of a sudden, you look at your watch and you think, well, it should be getting about time. And then the air starts to rattle. And you look and there it is. It just it's hell. It's hundreds of 500,000-pound bombs eaten into the triple canopy forest, and it just opens it up. After the dust settles and everything clears out, then it's our job to go in and look it over and see if we can identify anything. And my eyes were good enough to see trucks, the wreckage of trucks, things that look like what we see these days in the films that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, from the suicide bombers that are blowing up their vehicles. We see wreckage like that, and there were areas on some of those strikes where we'd find 15 or 20 large trucks. So that's definitely a part of the trail. There were areas where we'd find caches of food, caches of weapons, and every now and then it'd open up a tunnel complex. We had a guy named Chris Hunt, who was a classmate of mine, and in my platoon, and he had the best eyes of anyone that I knew of in the company. He would see a little spider hole that in reality is maybe 2 feet, 2.5 feet square, a little hole in the middle of we're talking about, acres, even perhaps extending to a full area of a square mile or so that would be in a long strip. And out of all that, his eyes could pick out like a 2 foot square hole down into the ground, and mark all of these things that we find on our maps. We'd go back into operations, and we'd debrief and identify these and pass that information on. Then they'd send ground troops out to go look at the things that we had found, and we occasionally get reports back that we discovered a tunnel complex that was very extensive and sometimes nothing. So you don't know what's going to happen.
Were the tunnel complexes in Laos or Vietnam, or both?
Oh, officially, everything that we did was in Vietnam. There's a possibility that we may have crossed over the border area sometimes in some of our operations, just because we were lost. We did not intentionally go across the border. For the B-52 strikes, though, where we're opening everything up, that was all inside of Vietnam. And that was all well planned, and everyone knew exactly where that was all going on.
Before you were talking about, how you spoke on the RT from one aircraft to the other. Was there any time when you knew that they must have been listening in?
Well, just from the first day that I went in to the last day that I came out, you assume that. If you don't assume that, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
So.
And was there any time when, let's say, you know they're listening in, and you get there to your area, and you think word for word they must have been listening in to everything, because there they were ready for you?
I don't know that I can identify anything like that, because we always presume that they're listening. We have flexibility, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and we're going to do what we're going to do, and we assume that they're listening. So that's nothing special to me.
It would be nice to speak about Vietnam combat veterans. What's that all about?
Well, this organization is something that formed as a spin-off of mudslides that happened in San Jose, California, quite some years ago in the early 80s. Lots of citizens came to help, and lots of the groups of citizens, they were just uncoordinated. They were stumbling all over themselves, working at cross purposes, and there seemed to develop this one group of guys that were all about the same age, and they just worked efficiently and effectively, and they didn't have to do a whole lot of talking and yammering about what it is that they were going to do. They just worked well together. And after a couple of weeks of them just out there volunteering and working well together, someone said, well, it looks like the job's about done. Why don't we get together and have dinner or something and spend some time just visiting with each other? And it was during that follow-up visiting that they all realized that they were all Vietnam veterans. And it was because of their prior combat experience, their prior military knowledge, that they had just effectively gravitated to each other and worked well together. And then they started getting together occasionally, and they decided to form an organization, and it wound up being Vietnam Combat Veterans Limited. And the organization, its most well-known project is the Moving Wall, and the original half-scale traveling replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And I ran into it in, I guess it was May of 1986, and it was an experience for me that I didn't understand. I looked up the names of several guys that I knew who had not come back from Vietnam alive. And it was a pretty powerful experience for me, and I didn't have it all put together. And then the moving wall would be in one town for a week, and then it'd travel to another town and get set up there and be there for a week, travel to another town. For about 6 months, I chased it around the country. And I met a lot of Vietnam veterans in the process of doing that. And many of them I wanted to stay in touch with because they were really neat guys. And we exchanged phone numbers and mailing addresses, and that was the main kind of communication in those days. You could fax now and then if somebody had a fax, but that wasn't routine. Normally it was phone calls. And after a few months, there were probably approaching 100 of us that were kind of staying in touch with each other. When something was going on or somebody had something they wanted to talk about, they'd call someone. And then the town of Chicago was going to have a Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Parade. And several of us found out about that and thought, well, yeah, let's go. And the moving wall was going to be there also. So I got in touch with some of the guys that I'd met and said, how about if we'll go do that, and let's plan a couple of hours that we can sit down together. Because with all the guys that we're in touch with this wide variety of high quality experience and knowledge and various other resources that we have, there's bound to be something that we could do that would really be worth doing. So we all agreed, yeah, we'd do that. We set a time, we got together, we sat down. There's probably, 12 or 15 of us. And we're ready for a couple of hours of trying to figure out something to do. And within the first 5 minutes, a guy named John Snyder from Hull, Georgia, says, well, Davis, hey, just staying in touch is worth doing. I said, well, yeah, it is. So we took the concept of what I had already been doing, staying in touch with people, and networking was a good catchphrase that was coming out in the mid '80s, and we were veterans, so we started calling it VetNet, short for Veterans Network. And I wound up then later becoming officially affiliated with Vietnam Combat Veterans Limited and becoming a part of their organization. So we operate as an information exchange network. For every real question, there's a bunch of answers out there. And with a little luck, a few of them might even be correct. So as the national director of VetNet, my responsibility to myself and to my fellows is to connect real questions with accurate answers. And I don't know a lot, but amongst the thousands of us out there who do know, someone knows if we can just connect them up together. And that's pretty much my function to help coordinate the communications.
Could you describe what your medals are?
The first one down here is the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with palm that was issued to my unit, and members of the unit at the time get then to wear it forever. Then these across the bottom here and up to here are basically, I was their medals. They're campaign medals. If you were there at the time in the location, you get that as acknowledgement of your service. Then this is an air medal that is issued for so many hours or so many combat missions. Then the Purple Heart, many people know that's for wounds. Doesn't take a smart guy to earn that one. This is a Bronze Star for general action. 2 distinguished flying crosses, the second of which was awarded for helping to break the attack on the Vietnamese Pentagon, the Joint General Staff headquarters in Saigon, during the Tet Offensive of '68. And this is a Silver Star. It was awarded during my first tour for having rescued the last remaining alive American with a ground operation one night out in the loop of the river at Duckwa.
Okay.
But basically, they're all because I had a commander who knew how to write. There are a lot of other GIs that did things that were a lot more courageous than what I did, but nobody saw it, or those who saw it didn't write it up.
Okay.
And after Sabre 6 had completed his low reconnaissance, he would then transmit his findings to the lead ship, commander of the troop-carrying ships, and the radio traffic would go something like this. Thunderbird 6, this is Sabre 6, over. Thunderbird 6, go. No fire received in the LZ. Recommend you approach from southwest to northeast. Touchdown at my smoke. Left brake on departure. Climb on heading 010, over. Not a lot of radio chatter, not a lot of mumbling, clear cut, concise. And the troops then, or I say troops, the aircraft crews then who are getting ready to go down into that area, that landing zone, in hostile territory, and it's presumed to be hostile because if there weren't bad guys out there, you wouldn't be spending that much money to be putting these troops in that into that area. They all know that Sabre 6 has been there, and they hear his nice southern drawl telling them that it's going to be okay, guys.
Excellent. What I would like.
Okay, I'll give you the breakdown.
Yeah.
Okay, for our unit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the UTT, Sabre 6 is commander.
Right.
I was
okay.
in Army during that period, right? And we were referred to as the Sabre element when there's a big monstrous operation going on. Right? All of us are the Sabre element. Okay, Sabre 6 is our commander. Sabre 7 is his wingman. The wingman of a lead ship is always one number more. Right? Then we have 3 platoons: first, second, third platoon, Playboys, Raiders, Dragons. The leader of the Playboys, Playboy 1-6. The leader of the Raiders, Raider 2-6. Of the Dragons, Dragon 3-6. Okay. Then each of the platoons have numbered breakdowns the same, and I'll just take you through the Playboys. Playboy 1-6, the platoon leader. 1-1, first fire team leader. 1-3, leader of the second fire team. 1-7, leader of the third fire team. Okay, so 1-1 has his wingman 1-2. 1-3 has his wingman 1-4. 1-7, DeYoung, has his wingman, Mike Davis, 1-8, which is my call sign, Playboy 1-8. Now, when we work with guys on the ground, we're working with these SOG troops. Okay? We're working with Ken Kabasic out in the middle of D-Zone, working a Delta operation. But we happen to know Ken Kabasic because he comes into our club in Saigon and drinks with us. Right? But for the most part, guys that we're working with out there, we don't know their names. We know their call signs. They don't know our names.
And why is that? Is it
because you're on the ground in the dirt and the mud and the trees and the crud, and I'm flying around up there in the cool air getting ready to, when I'm done, to go back to Saigon, take a shower, put on clean clothes, and go to town and get something to eat and have a party.
yes.
And we don't see each other. We never see each other. We never meet each other. All we know is what we hear of each other on the radio. And you know that when you hear a call sign coming down to you from the armed helicopters, and it's Playboy, you know what to expect. You know that you're going to have some professionals up there who are going to engage your enemy and neutralize your targets without killing you, because we don't do that. And the call sign is all you know. And when you hear Saber 6, you recognize that voice, and you recognize that call sign. You know what's getting ready to happen. Jack Johnson, Raider 26, he was the second platoon leader for a while. One of my favorite of all time radio transmissions is, and I don't actually remember who it was on the ground, but let's say it was one of the Ranger outfits, and they wore red berets, and the call sign was Red Hat. Right? Say, Red Hat 47. This is Raider 26. Would you mind if we'd spread a little death and destruction to your front? And no one ever disagreed.
So, have you ever met someone that recognises your call sign?
Oh yeah.
Years later, you know.
Oh
you
yeah.
And they go, "Oh, you are."
Oh yeah.
What do they say to you? I mean, is it sort of?
Well, you see, they don't really recognize my call sign. They recognize the Playboy.
Right, I see.
Because I was a wingman.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the only time you ever hear a wingman on the radio is when his fire team leader has given him instructions and he says 1-8, Roger,
And that's,
or 1-8, receiving fire, or 1-8's on fire and going down.
Were you ever close to being shot down?
Well, only every day that we found something.
Yeah.
You know, but it was close to shot down and shot down are, you know, two completely different things.
Were you ever shot down?
No, that was not authorized in the Playboys.
How many Playboys were shot down?
While I was in the unit, we didn't get shot down. And we had some that were shot, and we had some that were injured, and we had some that died. But my personal badge of honor is that in over 2,000 combat missions, never one drop of blood shed in a machine that I was flying or in one that I was protecting, because our outfit, fortunately, before I came, learned or relearned the lesson that George Patton taught us from World War II, that the name of this game is to make sure that other son of a bitch goes out and dies for his country. Then they figured out that you shouldn't be running around bragging about how many times you got shot down and how many crew chiefs you got killed and how many co-pilots you got wounded, because any damn fool can run around out there and get himself shot down. But my predecessors developed a set of rules. We called them the 12 cardinal rules. And if you lived by those rules as much as possible, where possible, and when you diverted from them, know that you are, know why you are, and know by how much so that you can get back, you stood a much better chance. And once you get around to it, there were common sense things. One is don't fly, well, the first one, don't fly through the dead man zone without a reason. And let's go out to War Zone D. And right on top of the trees, if a bad guy's down there in a little hole in the trees and he's looking up through it, and he hears you coming and he raises up his rifle and you go by and he starts shooting, you're already gone. Right? If you're up there at 1,200 feet and he's out here in an open rice paddy where he can see you coming, okay? I mean, he can see you real well. But at 1,200 feet, his tracers burn out at about 800 to 900 feet. His accuracy in engaging you has just diminished. Okay? So anything between where his tracers burn out and right on the deck, we call the dead man zone. And you got to pass through it now and then. But don't hang out there, because all you're doing is making it easy for him. Okay? Another one of the rules, and I mentioned this hole in the jungle, okay, is don't fly on the same track of another aircraft. So if number one comes by and he shoots but it's already gone, and you fly over the same path that he did, all he has to do is hold the trigger down and you'll fly through his bullets. Okay, now that's common sense when you finally stop to think about it. Okay? And then there's 10 others of these rules, and I'd be glad to provide them to you just for your own personal knowledge if you'd like.
Yeah.
When you put them all together, you make it extremely difficult for him to do his job and very favorable for your chances of being able to complete your mission, live through it, and be ready to pre-flight and fly another mission tomorrow.